weren't undone by an obvious enemy. Your downfall came from something quieter, softer. An innocent smile, a reassuring glance, a tender phrase spoken at just the moment you needed comfort. You believed it because you were raised on illusions. You were taught that if you were kind enough, patient enough, generous enough, the world would repay you in the same currency. You were told that love always meant honesty, that openness created loyalty, that authenticity was a guarantee of reward.
But now you're left with the aftermath. A heart stripped apart not by open attacks but by the hands of those who smiled while taking. A mind damaged not by fists, but by silence, indifference, and slow disappointment. You weren't naive, you were trained, conditioned to think that good intentions meant protection, that if you stayed pure, you couldn't lose. And yet you did, because no one ever told you the principle Machiavelli spoke centuries ago. People act not out of goodness, but out of necessity. They don't remain because they adore you. They remain because it benefits them. They linger because you don't resist, because your silence makes everything effortless. And when they've taken what they wanted, they leave, quietly, without warning, without remorse. And you're left questioning whether your kindness was a flaw, your warmth a weakness, whether maybe you were simply too gentle for a world this sharp. Let's be clear, this is not a message for comfort seekers. This is not another be your best self pep talk. This is war. A war you've been losing without knowing it, because the battlefield was silence and your weapons were never loaded. For those who felt exhausted by always being reachable, forgiving too quickly, giving too freely, if you've ever asked yourself why manipulators always win, why the kind ones always bleed, why giving everything leaves you empty, stop. Look again. Not with hopeful eyes, but with a strategist's mind. Here, we don't teach softness. We teach sharpness. We teach how to carry danger without ever raising your voice. The first step is unlearning the oldest lie you were ever told. That goodness equals safety. It doesn't. What shields you is presence, awareness, authority. This pain you feel doesn't scream, it whispers. It spreads in silence because you were told endurance was strength. People looked at your calm and called it wisdom. They saw your forgiveness and labeled it virtue. They saw your stillness and assumed you were at peace. What they didn't see, and never will, is what it cost you to hold that stillness. Because the truth is, you've been worn down, not by violence but by erosion. By those who leaned on your empathy until it emptied, who took your compassion as free permission, who mistook your loyalty for blindness, and you allowed it not from weakness but from hope. You believed they'd change, that if you remained soft, they would soften too. That kindness would shield you, that understanding would buy you peace. But no one showed up, and still you stayed because that's what you were taught. Stay kind, stay forgiving, stay present even as it burned you. And so you shrank. You silenced your own needs. You became the easy one, the peacemaker, the forgiver, the one who never asked for too much. And the world praised you. They called you mature, wise beyond your years. But what they really meant was you were convenient. You didn't disturb their comfort. And so you carried their burdens and buried your own. You called it strength. But deep inside, you knew something was dying. Because strength isn't in silence. It's in clarity. It isn't in staying despite the pain. It's in knowing when to leave. Machiavelli would have told you the truth. Silence that keeps the peace but costs you your soul isn't virtue. It's surrender. And how many times have you surrendered? Not in battles fought, but in the everyday betrayals of yourself. In conversations where you swallowed your truth. In relationships where you recognized the pattern but refused to disrupt it. Why? Because you were afraid of being too much. Afraid of the quiet after you set boundaries. Afraid of looking like the villain in someone else's story. But think about it, who's been the villain in yours? Who benefited from the version of you that never fought back? Here's the hard truth. You've been bleeding quietly and calling it resilience. But bleeding is not resilience, it's warning. It's your body screaming what your voice refused to. Endurance without acknowledgement isn't loyalty. It's self-erasure. So let this be your permission to stop performing peace for people who thrive on your silence. To stop shrinking so others can feel tall. To stop mistaking constant availability for virtue. Let them say you've changed. Let them call you distant, cold, unrecognizable. That's what people say when they lose access to the version of you who never said, no. You are not their mirror anymore, not their safety blanket, not their emotional sponge. You are something else now, heavier, sharper, unshakable. You are sovereign. You once thought it was your flaw that you were too trusting, too soft, too available. But what if I told you it wasn't accidental, it was engineered? You were conditioned to lose. Not by violence, but through subtle programming. From childhood you were rewarded for being agreeable, for smiling when it hurt, for staying silent when something was wrong, for saying yes when your whole body screamed no. Each time you complied, they praised you. Good job. That's maturity. What they really meant was, that's how you make yourself easy to control. You were trained to believe comfort equals connection, that pleasing others meant protection, that being liked was safer than being respected. And so your nervous system memorized the unspoken rule. Don't make things difficult. Now you flinch at conflict. You apologize for your tone even when you said nothing wrong. You explain yourself again and again, desperate to be understood. That isn't personality, it's programming. And society feeds on it. Look around, we glorify self-sacrifice. We romanticize being the bigger person. We applaud those who give endlessly and abandon them when they finally need something in return. What people love about your goodness isn't your heart. It's your predictability, because predictability is leverage. If they can predict you, they can move you. If they can move you, they can use you. Not everyone does it with malice, but control often hides behind the mask of love. They study your patterns, then test, push, pull, vanish, reappear, just enough to keep you on the hook. And the worst part? You stay, because you want to believe. You want to see the good, even while being drained by the bad. But listen, clarity is not cruelty. Boundaries are not betrayal. And being unreadable is not coldness, it is protection. You've spent years trying to be understood. Now it's time to become unpredictable. Not to deceive, but to defend. Because when no one can read you, no one can script you. No one can bait you into playing a game you didn't agree to play. This is the truth. Vulnerability in the wrong hands is not intimacy, it is leverage. And the only way forward is to stop leaking power. Machiavelli didn't teach cruelty. He taught control. He taught presence, mystery, strategic silence. Because true power isn't about how loud your voice is, it's about how carefully people listen when you barely speak. So let them guess. Let them wonder. Let them talk about how you've changed. They're right. You are no longer a pattern. You are no longer a map. You are a storm. Quiet, shifting, sovereign. Transformation begins not when you learn something new, but when you unlearn the lies that kept you small. You spent years shaving off your edges, muting your voice, being agreeable, being manageable. But the part you buried, the fiery, certain, uncompromising self, that is your power. And power is not dominance, it is clarity. And clarity will always feel dangerous to those who benefited from your confusion. They liked you better when you doubted yourself, when guilt made you compliant, when your kindness was unconditional. But that version of you is gone. Now, you don't over-explain. You don't shrink. You don't soften yourself just to keep peace. And yes, they feel it. They feel the stillness in you, the silence that can't be read. They'll say you've changed. And you have, because you've stopped bleeding to keep others warm. This isn't bitterness, it's boundary. It's sovereignty. It's ownership. And from here on, you don't owe explanations. You don't owe access. You don't owe your life to those who only valued you when you were easy to use. You don't need to be liked to be respected. You don't need to be visible to be powerful. You don't need to be soft to be unbreakable. Because power doesn't roar. It disappears and makes the world adjust to its absence. And now the world will adjust to you.